their feet sinking into the cold mud, pulling free with a soft wet sound. Their laughter floated back to the village, joined by the croak of frogs returning to the shrinking pools. When the ground was ready, the work began in the earnest, not in a scramble, but in steady, communal flow. Families moved together into the fields, the seeds carried in baskets slung from shoulders or balanced carefully on heaps. The silt underfoot was cool and pliant, giving slightly with each step, releasing a scent that was both fresh and deep, as if it held the memory of distant rains and far-off mountains. Men walked in long deliberate arcs, scattering seeds from one hand while the other guided their path. Women followed with flat wooden tools, brushing the soil lightly over the seeds, tucking them into their beds as one might tuck a child into sleep. Children came after, not to work so much as to learn, to watch the way the hand must move just so, to hear the quiet remarks exchanged between the elders about which plants would ripen earliest, which might need more water carried to them in the dry weeks ahead. The planting was also a kind of reunion. Neighbors who had seen each other only from across the flood waters now worked side by side again, speaking of the fish they had caught, the repairs they had made, the offerings they had left at the river's edge. Stories from the high water months mingled with plans for the harvest to come. The voices rose and fell with the breeze, carrying across the wide open fields that had been a lake not long ago. Even as they worked, the people kept an eye on the water still remaining in the lower places. These pools would shrink day by day, but for now they were alive with fish, insects, and birds, and they would feed the village for a little while longer. Sometimes a man would pause his planting to walk to a nearby pool, setting a small trap or casting a net in a practiced and hurried motion. The catch would be taken home for the evening meal, a final taste of the flood's generosity before the year turned fully to growth. The silt was the true inheritance of the flood, and the people treated it as such. Each handful seems to hold more than earth. It held promise, stored quietly through the months of waiting. The way it clung to the fingers before slipping free, the way it darkened when wet and lightened as it dried. These were signs the farmers read as easily as others might read a scroll. They knew which parts of the field would bear the strongest grain, which would be best for vegetables, which should rest a season to gather strength for the next year. In this way, the retreat of the flood was not an ending, but the start of the next chapter, one written in the slow looping script of the river's own hand. As the days passed and the planting neared completion, the air began to change once more. The heaviness of flood season lifted, replaced by a cleaner, drier warmth. The breeze no longer smelled of deep water, but of green shoots and turned oil. Birdsong returned in fuller measure, as if the land itself were exhaling into the new season. The people still carried the flood in their memories, in the stories they told at night, in the jars of dried fish stored away, in the repaired boats waiting for the next high water. But their eyes were already on the fields, on the tender lines of greens that would soon stitch the dark earth into the quilt of life. Evenings in the weeks after the flood had a softness that was their own. They did not carry the heavy stillness of the high water nights, when the air felt close and the water pressed against the walls of the village. Nor did they yet hold the dry clarity of the deep growing season, when the air cooled sharply after sunset. Instead, these evenings seemed to float in between, filled with the sense of damped earth giving itself over to the air, of green shoots breathing into open fields, of cooking fires finding their way through the spaces between homes. The light stretched longer now, spilling gold across the fresh planted ground, sliding over the dark silt until it glowed as if it lit from within. Shadows lengthened gently, not with the quick rush of shorter days, but with the unhurried grace of a season still in its middle step. People returned from the field slowly, with none of the urgency that sometimes marked the harvest months. A man might pause on the path home to rest a hand on the tether of his boat, checking that the mooring rope still held well before the damp line left by the flood. A woman might linger by a neighbor's wall, trading a handful of herbs for a coil of cord or story heard that morning in the market. Children walked in loose groups, their feet dusted with the fine silt that still clung to the village paths, their voices drifting upward in half-finished songs that broke into laughter without reason. Even the animals moved in slower rhythm, goats standing in doorways as if watching the world pass, dogs trailing one another through the narrow pools still caught in shaded corners of the lanes. By the time the sun reached the horizon, the village had gathered itself inward. Fires were lit in courtyards and on terraces, their smoke curling into the cool air. The scent of roasting fish, fresh bread, and stewed vegetables mingled and drifted freely. No walls could contain it. You could hear the faint clink of clay bowls being set down, the low murmur of conversations between people who had worked side by side that day, their words carrying the easy tone of those with no need to hurry. Meals were taken in the open, where the air night could pass between sips and bites, and the glow of lamps and embers casting shifting patterns on the walls behind the diners. The water, though further away now, was still close enough to be felt in the air, a faint coolness that seemed to rise from the ground itself. After eating, people lingered. Some stayed where they were, turning their stools towards the open sky to watch the first stars find their places. Others walked to the higher ground at the edge of the village, where they could see the moonlight catch on the last broad pools left behind by the flood. There, conversation slowed even further, becoming stretches of shared silence broken only by the sound of the breeze moving through the reeds. Sometimes, a child would ask questions about the flood that just passed, and an elder would answer not in exact measures but in stories. About a year when the flood brought a tree from far upstream, roots and all, or when a fisherman's net caught a bird resting on the current instead of the catch he expected. These stories were given gently, their details half practical, half poetic, because the flood was never just water to be measured. It was presence to be remembered. As the night deepened, the village seemed to breathe in unison. The laughter and voices that had warmed the air after the supper faded into murmurs, then into a quiet, broken only by the sounds of the earth and the water settling into themselves. From the rooftop, the view stretched far over the darkened fields. Patches of water still glimmered faintly, catching the silver of the moon, while the rest lay in shadow, stitched with the faint green of new shoots just visible in the starlight. The air was cooler now, but not cold. It carried the lingering warmth of the day alongside first hints of dew, and every inhalation felt steady and hurried. Somewhere close, a dog gave a single contented quack before tucking its head under a wing. Farther away, a rope creaked as a boat shifted gently against its mooring, rocked by some current too subtle to see. People lay down in their homes or sat still in the open, no longer speaking, their thoughts wandering in the slow drifting way of the river itself. The scent of the damp earth rose stronger as the breeze moved through the reeds, a reminder that the flood had only recently passed and that its touch still lingered in the soil. The sky above was wide and clear, the stars so numerous that it seemed the dark between them had thinned. In the quiet, you could almost imagine the river continuing to move through the village, not as water, but as a memory, an unseen current flowing through the minds of those who had lived beside it, year after year, flood after flood, and then the sounds of the night became the only conversation left. The slow chorus of insects, the sigh of the breeze across the open ground, the deep, unheard pulse of life that came when the day was over and the work was done. The village rested, the river rested, and in the balance between them, in this calm breathing moment, everything felt whole.